This episode is brought to you by the Chevy Silverado. According to J.D. Power, Chevy trucks have won more new vehicle quality awards than any other brand. But champions don't stop. They keep moving forward. And that's what the Chevy Silverado is all about. To learn more, visit Chevy.com. For J.D. Power 2022 U.S. award information, visit jdpower.com/award.
So there we are. I had planned to say round one is in the books, except it isn't. You come all the way to Australia in January, and it rains. Yes, I'm in Melbourne. My name's James Gray of iNews.co.uk, and the iNewspaper. This is a special update episode of the Tennis Unfiltered podcast. It's just me today, so if you're tuning in for Calvin or George, then I apologise. I also apologise for the noise. I am walking through Melbourne in the rain, as mentioned, on my way to Melbourne Park for day 3 and the concluding round 1, which is taking place over the next 4 or 5 hours, we hope, but the rain is persisting. I have the wrong shoes. I don't have a coat. It's not that size. Anyway, let's move on from the weather. I know it's British, but we should move on at some point. It's been a reasonably dramatic first 2 days, albeit I think people who were here last year would suggest it's not been nearly as dramatic as 12 months ago. Nick Kyrgios pulled out injured at the last minute, which is sort of simultaneously surprising and unsurprising for a man who himself claims he's a part-time tennis player, and I know Calvin would back me up on that. He was one of those circumstances where a proper panic station. Midway through Jack Draper versus Rafa Nadal, which we'll come on to in a minute, and an announcement went around the media room. I was actually on the court, and Nick Kyrgios said, Nick Kyrgios, right? And then they repeated it, and they might as well have said, this is not a drill. We kind of all knew what was coming at that point, because that really only happens when one thing is about to happen, and that's the brawl. Happened last year at Wimbledon, of course. Rafa Nadal called on a press conference, and again, we knew what was coming. Kyrgios revealed that he had a cyst growing next to his knee because of a tear in his meniscus. He's had various drainage procedures over the last week in an effort to get himself fit and ready, but it has not been. My sympathy for Nick Kyrgios is often limited by the man that he is, but you kind of have to feel some sympathy for a bloke who, as he said himself in the press conference with his physio Will Mayer, he said he's playing the tennis of his life, which is probably true. He's playing his home Grand Slam. He said it's like a home tournament. It's not really like a home tournament. It is a home tournament. You are Australian Grand Slam. Very few people get a chance to play at a home Grand Slam. Anyway, it's a landscape. He said he was extremely disappointed, devastated. He's going to have knee surgery, arthroscopic knee surgery, next week in Canberra. And I was actually pretty surprised to hear Will Mayer say that Indian Wells is a very realistic possibility for a comeback. I don't understand exactly what the ins and outs of these are, but the way he described it was that the tear in the meniscus sat towards the cyst would start growing, and if they left it would get worse. So, and if they played through it would get worse as well. So they are going to remove the cyst, clean up the meniscus tear, and apparently be back playing again in under 2 months. So we wait with interest to see exactly how that pans out. Anyway, we thought we might have another interview put out through Novak Djokovic, because he then cancelled a practice session on Monday, absolute panic stations again. He had in fact cancelled the public practice session and then rearranged it to a more private practice course over at the sort of back end of the site, the other side of John Cain Arena, for those who know Melbourne Park well, where the practice courts are. He did hit. His left hamstring was quite heavily bandaged, more so than it had been for, say, the exhibition match against Kyrgios, and significant concerns among, well, tennis fans, but also Djokovic fans, of course, albeit they were typically bullish on social media, claiming that there was nothing wrong with him based on absolutely no information whatsoever. But anyway, he played last night, and that maybe is literally, barring Alexis Popper in very late night win over Sen, which finished about 2 on Tuesday morning. The last match I watched was Djokovic against Roberto Baena, who, to put it quite bluntly, is not nearly as good a tennis player as Novak Djokovic. It showed 3-4 and love, I think it was. In the end, Djokovic was moved fine, I thought. He wasn't required to move a huge amount. He's very good, and he played extremely aggressively, which, is not unusual. When he senses that he can dominate, he does like to, and probably wouldn't want to get into a grind fest. But I just wondered whether the tactical approach he took was partly down to the fact that he didn't want to spend too much time on court, putting more, as almost very closely, load into his tantrum. So I think that probably informed the approach that he took. But, it was also a strong performance because he absolutely battered him, to put it quite bluntly again. I think probably Roberto Baena. I hope he can see the, not the funny side, but I hope he can see the fact that he just lost to one of the greatest of all time, not the greatest of all time. Getting a great chance, I would suggest. It wasn't the best match of the day by any stretch. The best match of the day was the court Andy Murray's 5-set win over Matteo Berrettini. It was, there was some real vintage Murray in there, like 2011 Murray. The running forehand cross court was firing. There were a few stooping backhand passes with Berrettini at the net. The big grunt before running down a drop shot. That one. He was great. It really was like the old days, and he had a bit of a swagger about him when he came to press afterwards. He said he paid lots of compliments to Matteo Berrettini, but he said, he got a bit hairy at the end, but I deserved to win. You don't often hear a player come out and sort of quite so plainly say, I won, and that was the right result. So it was quite interesting that he was a relatively humble man, came out and said that. I was intrigued. Someone had described him as bullish in pre-tournament, and I thought he was maybe not quite as confident as that, but I don't know, he knows he's playing really good tennis at the moment. And yes, Berrettini was not perfect, and yes, it was 5 sets, and 4 hours 49, his second longest Australian Open match of all time, just 1 minute shorter than that 4 hours 50 clash with Djokovic. I think it was his 6th longest match ever. It's not like he pumped him, but Berrettini is number 13 seed for a reason. And yes, his forehand didn't fire maybe as he would have liked to do in the very early stages, but overall I think Murray will walk away from this and think that this is a pretty excellent effort. And looking at his draw, by the way, I would say, I'm not going to say he's got a chance to go really deep, but it's really open in that part of the draw. If you actually look at it, he's nicked Berrettini's draw by beating him, so he's effectively the 13th seed now. The other seeds in his quarter are Roberto Bautista Agut, playing João Sousa today, Alejandro Davidovich-Fokina, who's number 30 seed, and Casper Ruud. And, alright, Casper Ruud would be a really big challenge if he gets that far. But all of the others, and okay, he's probably going to play Thanasi Kokkinakis in the second round, which is a challenge. It'll be on Labour, it'll be a big home crowd, but Murray loves those big occasions, so I'd kind of back him again. And then, if he gets through Ruud into the quarters, it's Fritz, probably, because Diego Schwartzman is playing injured, Alexander Zverev needed 5 sets to steal Juan Pablo Barria. I think I just think he's got a little chance here. He's got a little chance of doing what he said he wanted to do for so long, which is just get one more big run at a slam. Anyway, moving on from that, plenty of other very decent matches to tell you about. I thought I might look at the seeds and just kind of run through who's got out there. Lorenzo Musetti went out, beaten by Lloyd Harris, racing Lloyd Harris back his first tour level match since the French Open. Wrist problems and surgery. Went and played a couple of challenges at the time. One of them turned up on Sunday on the plane. Beat him. But a very good win for him. The number 19 team, Kyrgios, as I said, out with a knee injury. Borna Coric is out, maybe a slightly surprising early exit, along with Maimir Kekmanovic, who lost a Shari in a very, not fraught, but there was a big crowd on that court. I was 2 courts away watching Dan Evans beat Facundo Bagnis, and I could hear almost every chant, of which there were many.
This episode is brought to you by the Chevy Silverado. According to J.D. Power, Chevy trucks have won more new vehicle quality awards than any other brand. But champions don't stop. They keep moving forward. And that's what the Chevy Silverado is all about. To learn more, visit Chevy.com. For J.D. Power 2022 U.S. award information, visit jdpower.com/award.
I found somewhere slightly quieter, albeit echoier, but drier to talk about the women's draw, so I hope that's acceptable to you. These kind of voice notes are unfiltered, unedited, raw, so sometimes they'll be short of production value. Sometimes I'll be in my hotel room with my mic and have time to edit it. It'll vary a bit. Sometimes I have Calvin, sometimes I have George too, but it is currently, I think, about 2 a.m. in the UK, so they are asleep. The women's draw kind of has a little bit less going on in it. There were some late withdrawals in that as well. Paula Badosa, Ayla Tomljanovic, both succumbing to the Netflix curse, which could take out another one, having already taken Badosa, Tomljanovic, Berrettini and Kyrgios. Maria Sakkari has got trouble after her featured episode on Netflix, so we'll wait with interest, and I'll maybe talk about that a bit more because she's playing quite an exciting young player. But when we do our post-second round podcast, we'll talk about her maybe a bit more if she gets through. The significant kind of defeats in the first 2 days have been quite limited. No seeded player has actually lost on court in the first 2 days. Now, the women's draw was probably disproportionately hit by weather yesterday, just through chance. So quite a few of them haven't played yet. But it maybe just suggests that, I don't know, maybe the extreme heat has taken some of the upsets out of the equation. I'm not really sure yet to really be able to drill down into that. Iga Swiatek has been very impressive. She's actually, just as we speak, polishing off Camilla Osorio in straight sets. She beat Jewel Niemeyer in the first round, and as I say, looks like she's going to beat Osorio, and she may face Bianca Andreescu in the third round, which would be pretty intriguing. Andreescu knocked out Maria Muskova pretty simply in the first round, 6-2, 6-4. She beat her, and she now plays qualified Christina Buxer, who I actually picked in fantasy, so I'm hoping that she manages to overcome Andreescu. But it'd be very intriguing to see Swiatek up against Andreescu in the third round. The rest of her bracket is pretty much progressing as expected. Danielle Collins is through, same with Elena Rybakina. Rybakina is playing out on court 6, I believe. She's actually on a show court today for the first time, but I went and asked her how she felt, having previously complained about some of the courts that she found herself on. And she said something quite good, which was, I don't really care what court I'm playing on, as long as I keep winning, then, eventually I'll end up on the show court. And I admired that attitude. I thought it had a bit more about it than maybe just saying, well, I don't feel like a Grand Slam champion, which is what she said last summer. And didn't like the fact that she wasn't necessarily getting the biggest billing. So interesting to see how far she can go. I don't think the conditions here will suit her very much. The balls seem to fluff up quite quickly. All the players seem to be saying the same thing, that they're quite quick for the first game or so, but then after that they do fluff up and get quite slow, and you would think that for someone like Rebecca, that wouldn't be great. Who else has impressed me so far? Jelena Ostapenko 3 straight sets, and Diana Listremska, always a danger. And Coco Gauff also into the second round. But that really is the pick of the second round. It's tonight. Maybe you're listening to this as you're preparing to watch it at 8 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Coco Gauff up against Emma Raducanu. It is incredibly Emma Raducanu's first ever match on Rod Laver Arena. Again, she's only played here twice at all in the main draw, against Sloane Stephens and then Danka Kovanic last year. Both those matches were on the Margaret Court Arena. So she has hit on Rod Laver this week, albeit only briefly, because she's obviously been quite short in tennis. I was talking to Harriet Dart, who has played on Rod Laver 3 times actually, including against Maria Sharapova, and I sort of said, well, what's it like? What's different about it? And she said, well, there's a lot of room at the back of the court, so that's quite discombobulating. It can be quite a lot slower. It depends very much on what time of day, because sometimes there's sun, sometimes shadow. Obviously, this is a night match, so the roof will be closed and it'll be floodlit. So it'll take some getting used to. Coco Gauff has played on Rod Laver a number of times, including in her first round match when she opened Rod Laver and spoke about what an honour it was to do that. So it'll be a very interesting encounter, I hope. If both play well, it'll be a great match. John McEnroe was talking the other day, and he said he thinks that this is a complete free swing for Raducanu, and it's maybe the first time since she won the US Open that she's been in that situation. I think it'll be really interesting to see how she deals with that. Harriet, who knows her well, says she's someone who likes the big occasion. She likes rising to it. So I think I would agree with that from what little I know of her, and just having observed her a lot. I think she does like the competitiveness and the big occasion. That probably suits her down to the ground. So, and maybe being the underdog, it can be a great motivator for players. So we'll see. She beat Tamara Korpach in the first round. Korpach, Mike Dixon has described her as a limited player and got a bit of stick on Twitter, but I think I would probably agree with that. She doesn't have a lot going on. She's a good clay courter. She was quite open about the fact that she doesn't go great on hard courts, so I don't think she would argue with that hugely. Moving down the draw, down my soggy draw sheet, I actually missed out the seed who lost earlier when I said no seeds had lost. I forgot that Amanda Anisimova was beaten by Marta Kostyuk, 6-3, 6-4. I mean, tough first round, I have to say. Kostyuk really knows her game. And Anisimova has days where she doesn't play her best, and this was one of them. It makes Jessica Pegula's draw, because she was slated to meet Anisimova in the third round, even easier. She is, I still think, one of the favourites for the title beyond the Swiatek. She beat Christiane, who's obviously had a lot of injury troubles, 11-1 in the first round, so she's flying without wings, as they say. Harriet Dart was beaten by Jill Teichmann, had a few opportunities but never really got close to her in the second set, and was pretty animated on court. She chucked her racket from the baseline to the fence, hurled it really, and she was incredibly frustrated. And, it's hard not to feel sorry for a player in that situation, playing a big match in their career and unable to produce their best for whatever reason. She's not been fully fit, so she had an oblique injury that meant she had to miss the Hobart International. She's also got a bit of a coaching situation. She's leaning on the LTA coaches at the moment, Biana being one of them, Ian Bates being another one, but she doesn't have a permanent coach, and she desperately wants one. She can't sort one out. I understand actually that she did have a deal in place with someone, but that fell through. And I think if she can see her way to a permanent coach and a little bit of consistency and a bit more fitness, just in terms of staying injury free, then she's just inside the top 100. I think she thinks she can go higher, and why not? She's a scrapper. She's obviously limited, but she can scrap. Trying to think. The other big story yesterday was, which people subscribe to the Inside Tennis newsletter will already know, Camilla Giorgi, who is the Italian number 5. She won, I think she lost one game against Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, and then had quite a tough press conference, which is not the usual combination. Her family doctor is under investigation in Italy for providing false COVID documentation, and has named Giorgi as someone whom she gave this fake documentation. And actually, and I should point out, as you will see, Giorgi denies all of this. She says that the tennis player came to her asking for false COVID and other vaccination documentation, and Dr. Goloni has said that none of the Giorgi family whom she treats has ever had the COVID vaccine. Giorgi said she's had lots of different vaccines in different places, so, you know, I think she said she only had one with Goloni, so that maybe creates a little bit of doubt. There is an investigation ongoing. Tennis Australia said it's not their place to deal with it, so the question that, and Giorgi was asked this, 16 questions she had in total, all about this topic, and it wasn't helped by the fact that she doesn't speak great English, and there was some comprehension going on, and that her dad Sergio was in there, who people will remember as the guy who was vaping during one of her matches at the French Open, and he was mouthing off about the fact that there were no tennis questions. Well, I'm afraid this is a bigger story, and the Australian journalist wants to know if she had provided false documentation to the Australian authorities in order to get into the country last year, which obviously would be a big deal. She said she didn't. She continued to deny that. So we wait with interest the conclusion of that investigation. I suspect it will be a long, long time. I've realised that I said I'd go on and talk about Draper versus Nadal, and I didn't. We'll probably talk about it more with Calvin later in the week, but my own kind of feelings and speaking to people around it is that he, and from what he said, to be fair, he was supposed to have a 7-week pre-season, and he had a 2-week pre-season in the end because he got ill twice. He got a viral infection that put him onto antibiotics. He recovered from that, played a bit, got ill again at the Battle of the Brits for Christmas, and subsequently couldn't do the level of physical training he wanted to. He's got this new fitness trainer, Dejan Vojnovic, who's very experienced, and everyone who's worked with him speaks very highly of it. He has agreed to travel, which people might not know, not all fitness coaches wants to do all the travel on tour, but Dejan says he'll do it for as long as they need him. And, you know, Jack does need him. He knows that. He was cramping after 2 hours, pretty much. But as he said, at the beginning of the third set, after he won the second, it was a really even match. Jack says he felt in control. And yes, Nadal wasn't perfect, but, you know, Draper's been on tour less than a year. And to go out and feel in control against Rafa or Rod Laver, it's pretty impressive, really. And it was a shame. The thing that he said afterwards that I thought was really interesting, I asked him if he ever thought about retiring, because by the last set, he was unable to move. At one point, Rafa hit a winner past him that Draper would have got had he been fit. And Rafa fist pumped because it was to win the game, and then apologised for celebrating, which I thought was a bit much. But Draper said, no, I've learned now that your opponent, when you're 3 or 4-1 down in that last set, your opponent's worked hard to get in that position, and it's better to let them win, is actually what he said. I thought that was very interesting. He's had, I think, 10 retirements in his career. So he's probably also a bit sick of shaking hands prematurely. But I'm interested to see what Calvin says about that as well, and George. I'm sure they will have thoughts on it. That's all I've got time for now. I'm going to stumble back out into the Melbourne rain. I hope there's a bit more tennis today. I hope that I'll be back after the second round with George and Calvin.
Sports Social Podcast Network.